first day po, hindi pa po ako pinapayagan na umalis. Magantay pa po daw akong 3 days. So, nung first day, close na po lahat ng lift ng building namin. So, hindi na po ako pumayag na hindi makaalis din sa amo ko. First time ko po na ganun, ng putukan. Hindi ko po alam kung anong gagawin ko. Pero nag-aano po yung amo ko na calm lang daw po, ganun. Huwag mag-panic masyado.
February 16, meron na po kami natanggap na news na flight na po, cancel flight na po lahat. So, hindi na rin po ina-allow.
Around 4 or 5 a.m. Ukraine time, when we started hearing explosions near our place. And after that, a few hours later, we were called by our university staff and told us to go down to the shelters, like bomb shelters, because it wasn't safe and the sirens were going on.
You just heard from some of the latest batch of Filipinos who were repatriated from Ukraine last night. They recounted the distress and horror of seeing and hearing firsthand the explosions after Russia invaded Ukraine. While the fighting rages on, the Foreign Affairs Department says more than 100 Filipinos in Ukraine say they would rather stay for now and monitor the situation. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. On Tuesday evening, the Foreign Affairs Department welcomed back 13 Filipinos from Ukraine, bringing the total number of repatriated Filipinos to 19. But should we expect more on the way? To give us the latest, Marian Enriquez joins us live from Tagaytay. Marian, first off, what did the repatriated Filipinos have to say as they arrived back in the Philippines?
Yes, Robbie, the Department of Foreign Affairs has welcomed the arrival of 13 Filipinos who were repatriated from Ukraine last night around 10 o'clock in the evening. The DFA says that they are part of the 40 Filipinos who were evacuated to Lviv from the capital, Kiev. The group includes a baby and 3 students, and they're all just so grateful to have fled the Russian invasion and are now back home to be with their families. Let's listen to some of the interviews of the Filipinos who were repatriated from Ukraine.
Takot po siyempre, first time ko po na ganun, ng putukan. Hindi ko po alam kung anong gagawin ko. Pero nag-aano po yung amo ko na calm lang daw po, ganun. Huwag mag-panic masyado. Ganun. So, nung nag-ano na po ako sa embassy nga, yun, nag-decide na po talaga akong umalis.
Robbie, about 19 Filipinos have already been repatriated by the Philippine government, and the government says that they will be shouldering all the expenses from hotel accommodation to food and travel costs. And they also gave $200 for assistance, financial assistance. And the DFA has also identified about 140 Filipinos in Ukraine, but they are all just staying with their employers. And they've decided to stay for a little while just to see and wait for further developments. Robbie.
Okay, Maan, now we understand there is also a situation of, 21 Filipino seafarers who were on board a bulk carrier, the MV Breeze, if I'm reading that right. The vessel has been stranded at the port of Odessa. They're seeking repatriation. Has that been granted?
Yes, Robbie, the DFA has confirmed that there are about 21 Filipino seafarers on board the MVS Breeze and has arrived to Moldova right now. They've sought for repatriation and they're just waiting for updates, but they will be, for sure, in a few days, they will be back here in the Philippines, and they're just, wanted to go home because of the worsening tension, worsening conflict in the region.
Okay, na in the meantime, Maan, we know that the Philippines has taken a stronger stance. Initially, neutral ang Pilipinas, but the Philippines did sign on with that statement from the UN General Assembly. Do we expect any fallout from there, or does government actually have a plan to soften any spillover from that?
Yes, Robert, since the country has already taken a stand on the ongoing conflict in Eastern Europe, the palace has assured the public that there will be measures in place to weather the economic and trade effects of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. According to presidential spokesman Carlo Nograles, President Duterte has approved the recommendations of his economic team to strengthen our domestic economy. This includes stabilizing food prices, providing social protection, and exploring diplomatic channels to help resolve the conflict. Robbie.
Okay, maraming salamat, Maan, for those updates. That was Marian Enriquez reporting live from Tagaytay. The ongoing war in Ukraine is going to figure in this year's elections as candidates are getting asked on their stances on what the Philippines should do. For Unit Team, they're saying, why make a stand to begin with? Marian Enriquez is back with us with this report.
The Philippines has voted in favor of the United Nations resolution condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This as the current situation intensifies and its effects becoming more evident to Filipinos. While other presidential candidates took a stand against the Russian attacks, frontrunner Bongbong Marcos doesn't think a stance is needed on the matter.
Sir, anong stand natin? Neutral ba tayo?
I don't think there's a need to take a stand. We are not involved except for our nationals.
Marcos Jr. says the problem for the country now are those who do not want to be repatriated from Ukraine. 19 Filipinos have since been repatriated out of the hundreds staying in the area.
This is the national interest of what I worry about our nationals.
Marcos running mate Sara Duterte, meanwhile, clarified her neutral stance on the issue. Duterte emphasized the need to follow the direction of the national government.
It was a hypothetical question po. Sinagot ko siya in a hypothetical manner din. Opo. I am not a president or a vice president, so it doesn't really matter kung ano yung stand ko sa ngayon because I am not a part of the national government.
For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
The crisis in Ukraine does continue to escalate on the sixth day of Russia's invasion. At least 5 civilians were reportedly killed after 2 rockets struck the TV tower in Kyiv. Footage released by Ukraine's emergency services shows firefighters battling the blaze in the aftermath. Russia's invasion of Ukraine figured heavily in U.S. President Joe Biden's State of the Union speech. In his address, Biden outlined the impact of trade sanctions on Russia and also confirmed a ban on Russian flights over American airspace. Deviating from his prepared remarks, Biden said Russian leader Vladimir Putin has no idea what's coming. Close quote. And these are the other big stories tonight. As many areas in the Philippines shift to a lower alert level status, the Trade Department is making a push for workers to return on site to help bolster growth. After 2 years of virtual masses, many devotees are flocking to Catholic churches to mark the start of Lent. This time, the traditional ash marking on the forehead also makes a comeback. And more basketball fans can now watch the PBA games live as the new alert status lifts all restrictions on audience capacity. These big stories after the break. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. Alert Level 1 status now allows 100% on-site capacity in workplaces, but with many companies now fully adopting a hybrid work setup, Trade Department is now making a plea for workers to return to office. Shaila Francisco with this story.
This communications firm in Taguig remains vacant even after the government allowed 100% on-site capacity. Anna, one of its employees, said they are more productive under a work-from-home setup.
6 hours of my time and just stuck in the road. So now that 6 hours is translated to me being able to do the work and accomplish so much things.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for calling. My name is Alex. How may I help you today?
Some BPO employees are also able to save up while working at home.
Mas secure kasi nga dahil sa pandemic, mas sure ka na hindi ka magkakasakit. And then, for me, tingin ko mas matipid kasi hindi mo na kailangang mag-commute.
On the other hand, some employees, like those working in finance, are more inclined to work in office.
Mas gusto ko na sa office, mas mabilis yung action, mas mabilis yung interaction. And of course, yung dating ng documents, so nakikita ko kaagad.
A survey conducted by real estate services firm Collier show that majority will implement a hybrid setup this year. The Contact Center Association of the Philippines said it's the clients who are requesting for this kind of arrangement.
A client will say, okay, if we can retain good mix of people working on site and people working from home, that assures me of my service continuity to my customers, right? So despite of whatever things that will happen, this will definitely help us, right? Will help their customer. So there's no disruptions.
If they prefer a hybrid setup, the Trade Department is encouraging employers to allow more on-site workers. This is to help the economy recover after a series of lockdowns.
Siyempre, lalabas ang tao, gagastos for transportation, and then kung meron silang gustong bilhin, siyempre kakain yung mga yan, hindi ba? And then whatever they need for the house, on their way home, pwede na nilang bilhin. Maraming gumagastos, mas maraming perang umiikot.
Although the pandemic still brings uncertainties, what's clear now is that there is a new normal when it comes to work. Shaila Francisco, VR1 News.
Our offices prepared to shift back to on-site work. Let's find out from Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr., President of the Employers Confederation of the Philippines. Good evening, Mr. Ortiz Luis. Welcome to The Big Story.
Oh, good evening to you and to our watchers.
Sir, are offices ready to welcome back their employees? And I guess to that point also, what should employers be prepared for?
Well, actually, I think the companies, employers are ready for the work, no? But there are still some problems remaining. One is transportation is still a big problem. Yung mass transportation in the traffic is a turn-off, no? Which makes employees traveling time too long. And many of them are still need to be shuttled. But very few companies, especially the small ones, cannot afford shuttling their employees. Yeah. So government has to do something about this. The other one is where somehow there are offices that before the pandemic are really crowded. No? Now that it's 100%, they have to address some sort of distancing. No? And I guess some who cannot find spaces for expansion or to transfer that might be expensive, they would still remain hybrid for most of their employees. They will have to work at home, no? But I get overall efficiency is not that much, depending on the work actually. There are some work it can be done, but our internet is not that efficient. And so not all areas in Metro Manila that employers will be willing to have them work from home. Work from home now is because they have no choice. But if they're already allowed to work 100%, many companies would prefer that
But
because
Mr.
it's easier to monitor,
Ah.
and I guess the output of the employees is better.
Yes, right. But being allowed is one thing. Mandating for workers to come back is another thing. What are the responsibilities and roles here between employers and employees as they negotiate whether or not they should come back right now?
Well, there has been a lot of changes, a lot of adjustment that has been made, no? And if you ask the employees, of course, they would prefer working from home. But it depends again on what kind of work they are doing. No, frontliners cannot be working at home, and they were only repairing probably to work office work. Manufacturing, obviously, you have to be there. Construction, you have to be there. So office workers will have to determine who they deal with and what kind of work they do to be able to do still work from home for a lot of them, lot of their employees.
Okay, maraming salamat po. That was Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr., President of the Employers Confederation of the Philippines. How does the Philippine economy stand to benefit from the shift to Alert Level 1? Let's take a look at the numbers. According to NEDA, the eased restrictions under the most relaxed alert level will benefit more than 3/5 of the economy. It can also spur some 9.4 billion pesos worth of economic activity per week, 3 billion pesos of which are worker salaries. With this, more than 20 million workers will benefit from eased restrictions. That's the expectation. That's 48% of the country's workforce. Socioeconomic Planning Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua also notes that there will be 170,000 less jobless Filipinos by next quarter due to Alert Level 1. Now, should the entire country be under Alert Level 1, Chua says economic output per week will rise to 16.5 billion pesos. He says 300,000 more Filipinos will also be employed by the second quarter. For the big story in sports, more basketball fans can now watch PBA games live. The league is now allowing full audience capacity. But health and safety protocols will remain as fans are still required to present vaccination cards along with valid government IDs. The PBA returns to the Smart Araneta Coliseum with a doubleheader featuring Northport against Blackwater and a showdown between Magnolia and Meralco. Many are excited to have some sense of normalcy when it comes to watching PBA games live. Time for another quick break. When we return, Catholic devotees are flocking to churches to receive Ash during the first day of the Lenten season. And no more sprinkling this time, as Ash may now be marked on the faithful's forehead. Details after the break. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. Devotees in Metro Manila and nearby areas can now receive ash crosses on their foreheads as pandemic restrictions ease under Alert Level 1. A recap of today's observation of Ash Wednesday in this report by Jenny Dongo.
To mark the start of the Lenten season, thousands of Catholic faithful flocked to Quiapo Church to observe Ash Wednesday. Even before dawn, devotees wearing masks lined up outside Quiapo Church. Over the past 2 years, ashes were merely sprinkled on devotees' head due to strict pandemic restrictions. But as most of the country transitions to the new normal, the traditional marking of ash crosses on foreheads has made a comeback. For Jaylene Vitara, nothing beats the experience of finally stepping inside the church after 2 years of virtual masses.
Masaya. Masaya kasi nakapasok na kami ulit sa kanya. Kasi nung pandemic, ang hirap, hindi ka makapasok. Online ka lang ngayon, masaya ka kasi nandito ka sa kanya.
Though the government allows full capacity in all religious gatherings under Alert Level 1, Quiapo Church management still chose to err on the side of caution. They only allowing around 800 devotees or 80% of their capacity inside the church per mass. Over at the Baclaran Church, minimum health protocols like social distancing was hardly observed due to the huge crowd. Ash stations manned by nuns have been placed outside the church to reduce the flow of people heading inside. Faithfuls welcome the resumption of the tradition, but many remain cautious.
May fear pa rin.
Medyo po.
Bakit ma'am?
Siyempre, hindi naman na masasabi yung panahon. Social distancing lang po, tapos may alcohol naman kaming dala.
Basta social distancing tsaka sa outdoor naman din. Hindi rin naman kami papasok kasi may baggage kami dala.
The CBCP clarifies that receiving ash crosses is still optional for devotees. The CBCP clarifies that receiving ash crosses is still optional for devotees and that they can request to have the ashes sprinkled on their hair instead. For News 5, Jenny Dongon, We Are One News.
Let's have a quick rundown of how the campaign day went for our presidential hopefuls. In an interview with 1PH Wagpo, Labor leader Cal Yori de Guzman said he wants to abolish manpower agencies. He says third-party agencies are no longer needed, and in 6 months, contractual employees can be hired directly. Senator Ping Lacson and his running mate, Senator Tito Soto, visited Camarines Sur today. When asked about the COMELEC presidential debate, Lacson said he is strongly against giving topics in advance. He says candidates should be knowledgeable of various issues should they be president. Aksyon Demokratika Vice Presidential candidate Dr. Willie Ong sustained a minor injury on his left forearm after falling off a campaign float in Bataan. Dr. Ong said the muscle strain is not a setback and that he will continue to join the rest of the sorties in Luzon. Senator Manny Pacquiao brought his campaign to Pangasinan. He visited Binmalay, Lingayen, and San Carlos City. Senatorial candidates Lutgardo Barbo and former Vice President Jejomar Binay were also present. More than 100 former and current heads of schools, colleges, and universities threw their support behind the presidential bid of Leni Robredo and her running mate, Senator Kiko Pangilinan. The 117 signatories declared their unequivocal support, and they condemned historical revisionism, which they said wrongly presents the Marcos dictatorship as golden years. The Alliance of Concerned Teachers also formally endorsed Robredo and Pangilinan as their candidates. The hashtag Ipon Challenge is taking TikTok by storm. One TikToker is getting praised for her creative way to save. Encouraged by her parents, 25-year-old Keisha decided to save up money in case of an emergency. She sets aside 100 pesos every day. She tapes it on her calendar at the end of every week. And since the start of 2022, she already has 6,000 pesos taped on her calendar. Keisha says she dreams of having a small house in the future. Her Ipon video is now going viral on TikTok. It almost has 1 million views, more than 47,000 likes. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News. Good evening.